All right, we are live. Hey. So our topic for March, we're going to talk about finances and taxes. If you have any questions that you want me to talk about as we talk about money and taxes, I would love for you to go to askkristen.net, okay, and ask your questions there. Nothing is off the table. I want this to be a really safe place where we can talk about money, talk about finances, so that you can get the knowledge that you need to make good, healthy decisions for you and your family, and to pass that knowledge on to the children in your life. And so I think that before, hi, hey, Jeff. I think before we can really dig in to money, I think we need to have a discussion about how we feel about money, because it's really hard to make more money when you hate money, when you have negative feelings towards money. And so if you are in this position, this would be a really good opportunity to journal on how you're feeling about that. My personal belief, and I've studied money for a long time, is that money really amplifies who you are. And so if a bad person gets money, they can just do bad things. But if a good person gets money, if a giving person gets money, it just allows them to do more. And that's one thing that we've really been able to do. Since I started my business, I've been able to volunteer for nonprofit boards because I wasn't working all the time. I've been able to help nonprofits with their QuickBooks, with fundraising help, with volunteering at golf tournaments, with giving to charities. And it's just been able to allow me to do things that we just couldn't do before. And so when you're thinking about your relationship with money, I know some of you are probably angry at either how you've treated money before, maybe how you're currently treating money. You may have feelings about, people around you and what they do with their money, or maybe what celebrities do with their money. And I know, biblically, there are people that are on both sides, right? And there's this big debate in the church, in the various churches about money. I think it's really important, though, for you to sit down and kind of stake your claim in the ground and say, okay, this is the type of relationship that I want to have with money. And how much of it do I want? What do I want to be able to do with it? If I did have more of it come into my life. And I know, so Muriel just said, I wish I had more money. Okay, so if you want to make that happen, it's really important to say, okay, if I had more of it, what would I do? Right? Because I'm a really big believer. I know some of you are going to think this is kind of woo, but I'm a really big believer that you have to visualize things that you want. Okay, you have to picture yourself actually doing the thing. And so if I were to say, look, I want to have more money, right? And this is something that Jeff and I did. I want to have more money because I really believe that in developing nations, one of the big kind of jobs that women have is making sure that the family has water. This is also a job that children do. And so many women and children spend a good portion of their lives hauling water, okay, so that the family has water. And so I said, wouldn't it be really cool if we could have a substantial recurring donation to Charity Water, which is a group that does, like, they help set up wells and bring clean water to villages, which then allows children to go to school, which allows, you know, women to start small businesses and help care for their families. It's just amazing what they do. So I said, wouldn't it be cool if we could do that? I'd really like to do that. You know, we've sat down and said, okay, I'd love to be able to, you know, put money aside for Eric, right, into an account for Eric. And so I visualize that kind of, and that's one thing people tell me, you know, people ask me all the time, like, how do I get motivated to finish the course? How do I get motivated to start the course? I'm like, look, you got, like, just saying, like, I want to have more money is not enough. You got to know, like, why, right? And really deeply feel, why do I want to change my life? What do I want to do with this change? And know exactly what you want. Because one thing that I see with a lot of my clients is they just say, I want to have more money. I'm like, okay, great. And how much is that? And they don't know. They have no idea what that number is. And so they keep pushing and they keep stressing themselves out. And they're still not seeing their families because there's no end game. There's no end point. And so it's really critically important to know what you want to do with the money. How much money do you want? Right? Because I'm telling you, there, like, an infinite amount of money is not going to make you happy. Okay. But if you define, like, look, I want to be able to pay my bills. I want to be able to be home with my kids. I want to be able to put some money aside for my kid to go to college, or my kid to go to trade school, or just my kids to, you know, be able to put a down payment on a house someday, whatever that looks like for you. This is what I want. And then you really put those goals somewhere. Okay. So, like, this is, like, seriously, like, this is my sticky note of my goals for the month. And it sits here on my monitor, a little sticky note, so I see it all the time. Okay. Because a goal is a dream with a plan. Okay. And so you've got to figure out, you can't just say, I want more money. Okay. That's awesome. That's a dream. That's great. That's not going to motivate you to do anything. Okay. That's a really good start. Okay. Okay. Let's see. I would be able to do anything my heart desire, buy my home, record albums, vacations. I haven't had many a year. So that's, now you're getting closer, right? I want to retire and I want to work part-time at home and make $2,500 a month. Now that's solid, right? Because we can turn that into clients, right? So if you were doing bookkeeping, we asked bookkeeper training school, we said, how much is your average monthly client? And they pretty much agreed that was about $300 a month, right? So if you want to make $2,500 a month, that's 9 clients. Now I have a tangible thing right now. Like, okay, if that's what I want to make, I know how many clients I need, right? If it's the average client. Now we have something tangible to go after, right? Now, if you're working in another field, then you have to sit there and go, okay, you know, if you're a web designer, how many websites do you have to build a month to make that happen? Right? If you're a virtual assistant, how many clients do you need to have to make that happen on retainer, or how many projects do you have to pick up on average every month? And then you can start to build. But when you just say, I want to make more money, right? It's really hard to turn that into a plan, and it's really hard to know if you've made it. And so that's why I think it's critically important that before we start talking about, you know, savings and paying down debt, or, you know, good debt versus bad debt, or any of those things, then before we can do that, we have to make sure that you have an okay money mindset. Because if you think I want more money, but I think money's evil, that's a conflict, right? It's going to make your brain hurt. And so I want you to make sure that if you sat down and said, okay, if I made an extra $2,000 a month or $3,000 a month, what does that do to my mindset? Like, what do I think about that money? Because if you're not okay with that, then it's going to be really hard for you to get there. Okay. And sometimes stuff that we've got to sort of think about what did my parents teach me about money or not teach me about money? What was their attitude towards money? What did they think of people who had money? Like, you've really got to start thinking about these things. Because what I find with a lot of the people I work with is that they kind of push ahead and they make some money and then they go, oh my God, I hate money. I don't like it. And their business starts to collapse. And so I'd much rather have you guys start to deal with this stuff before we get to the point that you're making money. Okay. Or even if you're starting to make some money, are you having these conversations with yourself? Are you having, you're journaling about this? And so it can be just as really, it can be as simple as journaling about, okay, what did my family teach me about money? Right? How do I feel about people who have money? What has the Bible taught me about money? Wherever you're coming at this from, but like, ask yourself some really key questions and think about it and write about it and get it out there on paper. So that way you can start to deal with those feelings. Okay. Because it's really hard to do the rest if there's any sort of resentment or anger or anything like that related to money. Okay. And I love how you guys are really starting to put numbers together. And I'm seeing that in the Empower Bookkeeper Network for bookkeeper training schools. I'm starting to see people are saying, okay, I now have a number to work towards, and I know how many clients that means for me. And now you can start to put together a plan, and you know when you've won, right? You know when you've hit your goal. They say in goal setting that you want to make SMART goals, and a SMART goal must be measurable. The M stands for measurable. Okay. If you don't know what the end point is, you can't get there. And that may be why you're feeling like you're not winning. Right. And that's why a lot of business owners get stressed out, because they just say, I want to make more money. I want to make more money. They never set an end point. So I want you to set that goal for yourself. Okay. Whether you're in bookkeeper training school or whether you're following my page because you're a business owner, if you do not have an end point, right? And I write down every single day, every day I write down, if you've never heard this from me before, every day I write down 3 things I'm grateful for, 3 things I like about myself, and 3 things I want. And every single day, one of those 3 things is an income number. I want to make this much this year. And that's what drives me to go forward in our business. And I watch those numbers in our business to see how we're tracking and how we're doing. Because then I know, okay, do I have to ramp it up? Right? Are we doing okay? Do we have to change things? It's just super important to know that. So over the next couple of days, spend some time with your money mindset. And if this is something you're struggling with, go to askkristen.net. That's Ask Kristen with 2 I's, and submit your question. And so that way we can help you work through that this month as we deal with money and taxes. All right. And if you're interested in joining Bookkeeper Training School, go to bookkeepertrainingschool.com. Go check out my free training on how busy moms are becoming highly paid bookkeepers while their kids are napping. It's a great training. It's a really good way to figure out, what bookkeeping is and how to get started. And I'd love to have you take that. All right, guys, take care. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.